Good morning, Pastor Will here for February 21st, 2021, Madrid United Methodist Church. I admit, I'm going to confess, this is the second time I've recorded this sermon for today. I was at the end of the sermon a while ago. I got to the very end and then I told a horrible joke. It was so bad that I don't dare air it. So I'm having to start over. And plus I got the giggles at the beginning of the other one as well. But anyway, today we're going to look at John 2, verses 1 through 11. This is part 5 of our 166-part series, Better Know a Miracle. Today in prayer, let's remember Blakely Koenig. She's a 10-year-old. She's going through chemotherapy, and she's not taking it well. It's causing her a lot of problems and a lot of pain. Let's remember her. Let's remember her parents as they are a part of this and the pain of this. Remember the Mary Smith family. Mary died Thursday night. Let's remember the people who are cold in all different parts of the country and the world and aren't properly cared for. And let's remember the churches of the world, that they remember their calling to serve instead of to be served. Okay, John 2, 1 through 11, On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. In John's gospel, the mother of Jesus is always called the mother of Jesus or woman. She's never called Mary, but I'll probably use Mary because it's easier to communicate. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what concern is that to you or me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now standing there were 6 stone jars for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water," and they filled them up to the brim. He said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the chief steward." So they took it. When the steward tasted the water that had become wine and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the steward called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine after the guests have become drunk. But you have kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this, the first of his signs in Cana of Galilee, and revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Now this text, I was supposed to preach it last week as the partner to the Exodus 15 text, because both of these texts have to do with new beginnings. The new beginning of last week, Exodus 15, was the Hebrews' escape from Egypt and slavery and starting all over, and they're in the wilderness and they're thirsty and the water is stagnant and they can't drink it, and God provides a way for Moses to turn the water into drinkable water. And they see and they have new insights into this new life with God. And today's is a new beginning. This is Jesus' first sign or first miracle in the book of John. And we see that with life with Jesus is going to be different. The disciples who he just called in chapter 1, and we're told, "You will see great things if you follow me. Greater things if you follow me," in chapter 1, verse 50, Jesus said. And now they're starting to see that. This is the first time they start to see that, when the water is turned into wine and they believe in his authority. So last week, if I had preached it last week, it would have been on Transfiguration Sunday. And on Transfiguration Sunday, that story is told in the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, but it's not told in John. Why is that? Well, I believe it's because in John doesn't have these special stories that show the divinity of Jesus, or just these special mountaintop experiences where you can see the glory of Jesus. For John's gospel, you see the glory of Jesus in his whole life, in everything he does. And we see that today he's just going to a party, to a wedding party, and something miraculous occurs. And I think that's true of life today, that when we live life today, focused on God and God's way, that we see miracles occur. That the I don't want to say non-believer, because I'm not all that hot on that term. I don't really care if people say they believe in Jesus. I want to see you love your neighbor by taking care of them. That's belief. So let's see. Lost my train of thought. But if we focus on God and live like Christ, I believe that miracles are possible. All right. So, verse 11, we're told it's the first of Jesus' signs in the gospel. I talked about that. And then, what is a miracle? I haven't discussed that yet. We're up to part 5 of a 166-part series. And now I'm going to talk about what a miracle is. In John's gospel, the writer of John calls miracles signs. Signs, miracles, same thing. Why is it a sign? Because it's pointing to something. If you look at a stop sign, the point of that stop sign is not the sign. Stop. What is it saying to me? The sign. No, the point of the stop sign is to point you to something else. Stop and don't cause a wreck. That kind of thing. If you look at an exit sign above a door, the point of that sign is not exit. Oh, look, it's glorious. It's wonderful. It's incredible. No, it's to show where there's a way out of the building. It points to something else, something beyond itself. And that's the way it is with miracles. Miracles are not the focus themselves. They point to something else. And in the Bible, miracles always point to the glory of God. Always. And if I'm going to go with that definition, then you'll understand why I don't include some things in the Bible as miraculous that other people might include. Because if it doesn't point to the glory of God, to me, it's not a miracle. And since my hermeneutic is Jesus, specifically the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5 through 7, anything that is destructive of others can't be a miracle. Because that's not who God is. God is a giver of life, not a taker of life. So let's beware that we don't get caught in the trap of focusing on miracles themselves. We have to look to where the miracle is pointing. Let's say the feeding of the 5,000. 5,000 people were fed with just a few loaves and fishes. That's miraculous. But what is it telling us? What's the point? Is it just a good trick for Jesus to make money? No. It's pointing to the grace and compassion of God for people who don't even plan, who didn't plan ahead. Now, what about this? What about how people are so quick to condemn people who, let's say, go bankrupt or go homeless or whatever, have some financial calamity? And a lot of people will sit back and go, well, they didn't plan ahead. Too bad, so sad. Now, how does God react to that? God would have compassion for them, according to how Jesus acts in the Gospels. Those people didn't plan and bring something to eat. Well, too bad, let them starve. No, we'll work it out. We'll work it out. Yeah, let's see what God can do if we just try to love people. Churches who go out of their way to care for people are able to do miraculous things. People ask, how can a church of just a handful of people, literally a handful of people like Madrid, feed so many people? Because they're daring to love people. And God's doing the rest. That's why. Compassion, to have compassion is to have the soul of God. Without the soul of God in any group, in any community, there is no church. So what is a miracle? Some might say the Falcons winning a Super Bowl. But a miracle is defined in many different ways. Some define a miracle as a lucky event that is surprising and unexpected, such as the Falcons winning the Super Bowl. But does that point to the glory of God? I don't think so. Some would describe a miracle as an unusual and mysterious event that's thought to have been caused by a God because it does not follow the usual laws of nature. Some define a miracle as the occurrence of an amazing and improbable event, often interpreted to have religious origins and to have been caused by God. Some define a miracle as surprising events regarded as caused by God, either directly or indirectly by means of a chosen human intermediary. I was real close to going with that one, and I agree with that one actually. But there's one that I like even better, one definition I like even better. A miracle is a less common kind of God's activity, a less common kind of God's activity, in which God arouses people's awe and wonder and bears witness to God's self. So God does something that just catches our attention and points to God. Less common. So what does the John 2 text miracle, what does the John 2 text miracle say about Jesus or God? Well, this is the inaugural event of Jesus' ministry. In chapter 1, the Word becomes flesh. The Word, this in flesh, calls some people to follow him and tells them, you're going to see great things if you follow me. You're going to see God doing great things in the world if you follow me. And then in John chapter 2, we start to see these great things. It's the inaugural event of Jesus' ministry. And it shows us who Jesus is, really, that he has great authority. And it brings in a new age. Jesus is bringing in a new age. And just like last week's text in the Exodus 15 text, we see a new beginning for the people. In verse 1, we're told on the third day, they go to this wedding. His whole family's there, his disciples are there, everybody's there. The third day of what? Well, the third day after he called his disciples in chapter 1. And then a great crisis occurs. The wine runs out. No more booze. What are we going to do? Everybody's going to go home. Oh. Without the wine, the celebration comes to its conclusion too early, and it brings shame onto the family, who would have been saving for quite some time to provide wine to their guest. You know, in the movies, we often see movies of the Middle East showing, in the ancient Middle East, we see stories like about Easter or, I don't know, Ben-Hur or something like that. We see these movies and the wine is always flowing freely. Everybody is drinking wine. They're drinking out of metal cups. These are rare things. They would have been rare. You would have been incredibly wealthy to have a metal cup, for one thing, and to have wine. The daily diet of the people back then, of the common people, was cheese and bread, olive oil, and water. Wine was a big deal. The wedding's a big deal. The families prepare and they have wine because it's a big celebration. But to run out of wine would bring great shame to the family. I think that's one reason that Jesus does the miracle, because the soul of God is compassion. And why should this family have shame upon them if Jesus was there to do something about it? So the wine runs out. The mother of Jesus comes to Jesus and says, you know, the family's run out of wine. Oh, can you believe it? Now we like the way the text presents itself as Mary very somberly or concernedly coming to her son and going, they've run out of wine. But I kind of like to think of it as, and I know this is stereotypical and wrong of me, but I'm going to go with it, of a mom coming to a son in a gossipy way. They've run out of wine. Can you believe it? They sure didn't plan. And then Jesus saying, well, what business is that of yours? What business is that of mine? That's none of our business. You know? Woman, Jesus says, what concern is that to you or me? My hour has not yet come. What does he mean by that? My hour has not yet come. What he means is that his agenda in life, what he does in life, his decisions in life are not determined by traditional ties. Even his family doesn't determine his decisions in life. Even his dear beloved mother, who stood at the foot of the cross as he died and wept for him, is not going to influence what he does. Only God is going to influence how Jesus acts. John's text, the point of his text here is not to communicate that Jesus was being rude to his mom, but that Jesus would not be dictated or manipulated or coerced or guilted or anything by anyone, but that he only responds to God. I remember when I was a child and I first heard this story, and I heard, "Woman, what concern is that to you or me?" And I thought, I'm going to try that on my mom. Because, Jesus, everybody loves Jesus. Everybody respects Jesus. If Jesus says it, it must be okay. So later that week, my mom said something to me, and I said, "Woman, what concern is that to me or to you?" And I learned, very concretely at that moment that I definitely am not Jesus. So we see here that Jesus is free from all human control and only responds to his Father God. No one else. He has total allegiance to God. No one else. Nothing else. We see this a lot in the South, where we judge each other and we size each other up. You meet somebody new, and you go, "Oh, what's your name?" "I'm John." "Oh, John, where are you from?" "Well, I've lived here all my life." "Really? And we've never met?" "Who's your daddy? Who's your mama? Who's your family?" We're trying to size them up to determine what we think we know about that family, what we've heard about them. But what if this new guy we've met isn't like his family? That throws us for a loop. Jesus wasn't like his family. Jesus made decisions based not on what his family had taught him alone, but based on his relationship with God. Mary turns to the servants who were there and says, "Do whatever he tells you." This is the whole essence of this chapter, of these verses. Do whatever he tells you. In John's gospel, to be a disciple of Christ, to be a disciple of Jesus, to be faithful to God, is to do whatever Jesus tells you. That's it. Do whatever he tells you. Notice it's not belief. Belief isn't the essence of discipleship in John's gospel here. It is doing. Do what he tells you. Not believe what he tells you. Imagine they're pouring the water into these big jugs, 150 gallons of water into these big jugs. They're sitting around talking with Jesus. And they're like, "What are you going to do? This is just water." And he goes, "I'm going to turn this into wine." "Oh, yeah, right. But they keep pouring the water. The water is filled. The jugs are filled. Doing what Jesus commands. Trusting Jesus. Not belief, trust. To trust in Jesus is to enter into a covenant with Jesus. To do what God commands. So they got 150 gallons of water. This is an extravagant amount of wine. 150 gallons of wine, just imagine. Just imagine how much wine that is. This is an extravagant showing of Jesus' authority and of God's compassion. Some of you know me and know typically when a church has communion, they'll have it by intinction with a goblet and everybody sharing the common cup, either by drinking or dipping the bread into the cup. Or they'll have it with these little tiny juice cups that hold maybe a half an ounce. And as you may know, whenever some of you have been around me when I serve communion, I can't stand those little cups because they communicate a theology of stinginess. God's love for you is just a little bit. We can't afford to give you any more. I try to get big giant cups. It costs more money, sure. Sure does. That's the point. And you get a big cup, slake your thirst. Be full of God's love and grace. And we see that in 150 gallons of wine at this celebration of two people joining together in marriage. Extravagance is at the center of all that God does for creation, from the Garden of Eden into now. God is always an extravagant giver. God is never stingy. When we follow the way of God, there is always plenty for all. When we follow the way of Wall Street, there is never enough. So who do we serve? I'm real proud of this church, Madrid United Methodist Church, in whose building I'm sitting right now. I've seen their extravagance in their feeding other people. They've served over 30,000 meals to people in the community since June of last year. And over that year, we've had Easter, we've had Halloween, we've had Christmas, and I've seen these people go out of their way to get fun things to give away as well in the food. Candy, chocolates, a Coca-Cola even, a Pepsi, whatever. When you're poor or when you're struggling, you don't have resources to get something sweet or good. You just try to survive. But God is one who wants you to live life to the fullest and see that life is sweet. The waters were turned from bitterness to sweetness because life with God is sweet and good. And I'm just proud of Madrid for communicating that type of theology with people. In their giving. Well done, well done. So, these jars, what were they for to begin with? They were for ritualistic cleansing of dusty hands and feet before eating. Some scholars believe that in filling the jugs with, replacing the water with wine, Jesus was saying, we're out with the old and in with the new. I'm not willing to go that far because that would be to say to do away with Judaism and everything that came before Christ. And I don't think that that was the message. I think the message is newness. I think that any halfway intelligent Christian knows that our faith is a Jewish faith as well. Jesus was Jewish. He wasn't doing away with himself. But I think the point is the transformation of the wine indicates a transformation of life, a new way of thinking, not just the old way. We're not bound by tradition. The church has failed tremendously in thinking that it has to protect tradition at all costs, and that's what its calling is. It has nothing to do with that. Our calling has nothing to do with tradition. It has to do with living in the present and the future. That's what it has to do with in the name of Christ. A new life. So the chief steward wonders where the new wine came from, what were the origins of the wine, but the servants knew where it came from. It came from this guy, Jesus, who is here. And it's important to note here that John does not equate the servants' knowledge of what Jesus did with faith. They knew who Jesus was, but that doesn't mean they had faith in him. Am I willing to go there? They did trust him, and that's faith. They did trust him by doing what he said. We put so much emphasis on belief, but belief has been damning for the church because so many people think that if they just say, I believe I will take Jesus as my personal Lord and Savior, that's what it means to be a Christian or a disciple of Jesus. And it is not. To be a disciple of Jesus is to follow Jesus, to take up our cross and follow him and give our lives for others who don't deserve it, who don't deserve our lives. It is in the doing that we are disciples of Christ. It is in the grace of God that we are saved. But it is not in belief. Belief absent of doing is a farce and a mockery of ourselves. Churches are full of people who know all the stories of Jesus and can quote scripture backwards and forward. Zippity-doo-dah, so what? When a church sees a system of oppression in a community and doesn't do anything to change that, it lacks the compassion of God. And it does not believe, no matter how much it says it believes or how much it says it worships God. Apart from compassion, apart from acting like Jesus, it's just a club. I think of the people struggling in Texas and other places right now with the cold this winter in the United States of America. And I think of that guy, that Texas mayor who's, said, only the strong survive, you're not my problem. I'm quoting out of context, or I'm paraphrasing rather. But that was the essence of it. Only the strong survive. If you didn't prepare, tough luck. And I'm thinking of dear Senator Ted Cruz, oh, my people are in peril. Let's go to the Caribbean. You know, I'd be willing to bet these guys would also say they believe in God. They believe in Jesus. They sure don't act like it. They don't really believe. You know, in the Old Testament, to have an abundance of good wine was a sign of the joyous arrival of God's new age. You can see this in the book of Amos and in Joel. And in Jesus, we see the same thing. We see the fulfillment of Old Testament hopes. God's new age has arrived. Things are going to be different. And in this story, we see that life is going to take on new meaning and new ways of doing things. And we're living in two times at one time. To believe in Jesus, to trust in Jesus, is to live a life within a life where nothing has changed, but everything has changed. Like that line in the song One Headlight by the Wallflyers. I ain't changed, but I know I ain't the same. That's what it's like to be a disciple of Jesus. Everything's the same in the world, but we're different, and we live differently. We live trusting in Christ instead of trusting in the system. We live in a place where water becomes wine and word becomes flesh, where the hour that has not yet come is here. What will be is. What seems to be is no more, where all is new. True disciples of Jesus live life totally transformed, yet existence goes on as before. Living to the step of a different order, not changed by the vagaries of society, yet totally changed by the invitation of Jesus to walk with him. It is in the ordinary circumstances of life that the hidden glory of Jesus is revealed. Just another wedding, but yet people see God. The miracle is not just the change of the water to wine. This points to the bigger event. Where does the miracle point? It points to the change of the meaning of life, or of the meaning of community. In the new community, total allegiance is to God and God alone, not to your nation, not to your family, not to your job, not to your friends, not to your sports team. Those are all well and good, but that's not where your allegiance lies. That's not the focus of all your decisions you make in life. Knowledge of Jesus or who he is really doesn't matter. What matters is following Jesus and acting like him in the world, doing what he does. And only those who live in this kind of newness of life and who continue to love others, even when all logic says that's crazy, understand. I drove a Jeep Wrangler for 20 years, and there was a little saying we had. I think Harley Davidson has the same kind of saying. People go, why do you like a Jeep? Why do you drive a Jeep all the time? And the response is, well, it's a Jeep thing. If I have to explain it, you wouldn't understand. Being a disciple of Christ is a relationship thing with God. It's not something easily explained. It can only be lived to be comprehended. We've been living the last few months with COVID-19, and this has been, in some ways, an eye-opener for us because it helps us. We are in a time of crisis, and we are in a time of crisis as the church, and we can see opportunity of not returning to the way we used to do things, but realizing how precious life is, that we need to be doing things differently, walking with Christ, our allegiance to God and God alone. The church is not called to put its faith in routine or tradition, but to put its faith, its trust in God, and live as Jesus lives and do as Jesus says, rather than relying on ourselves and convincing ourselves that simply believing is enough to know God. It is not. Peace be with you.